Hello, my name is Kristen Bolden, and I'd like to welcome you to The Other Side of History. Now, in this talk, we're going to do part 2 of the stories of the Nonconformist ministers in England during the 17th century. Dr. Edward Stennett was a Nonconformist minister and physician. It was by practicing medicine that he was able to support his family. Edward had taken the side of Parliament against the king, and as a result, his relations separated from him. He was left without any means of support, and this is why he took up medicine. He became not only a doctor, but also famous and prosperous. Edward moved to Wallingford and made his home in the castle there. Now, Wallingford Castle is a medieval castle that is situated in the English county of Oxfordshire, adjacent to the River Thames. Now, inside the castle, Edward had his own Seventh-day Baptist congregation to whom he preached. There was an advantage to living in the castle. The castle had once been a royal residence, and because of that, it was exempt from search. The congregation was free to worship because no search warrant could be taken out to enter the castle to see what was taking place. Now, every part of their religious worship was able to be exercised without any danger of legal conviction, unless informers were admitted. And of course, they were very careful to prevent any informants. Close to the castle lived a gentleman who was a justice of the peace. He was a very strong churchman, and he hated Edward and his ministry. Edward showed him, however, the greatest kindness, and he helped him through his profession in medicine. In fact, this churchman was under considerable obligation to Edward, having often had his assistance as a physician for his family, without giving any reward. This justice of the peace, he had a bitter hatred to the truth, and he determined to overthrow Edward and his ministry. He had made several fruitless attempts to get his emissaries admitted into the castle in order to get a conviction. Finally, he devised a wicked plan. Hiring some people, he made them swear an oath that they had been present in the castle when a nonconformist service was going on. Even the local vicar joined this little group. None of these people had ever been in the castle for a worship service. They took their complaint to the Newbury assize or court and called for Edward's arrest and imprisonment. Their hatred was so great that they were willing to descend to perjury. Edward was told about the indictment that was laid against him on the Conventicle Act, founded upon the oaths of several witnesses. He was sure that there was nothing but perjury that could support it, and was resolved to traverse it. The time came when Edward was summoned to appear before the court there at Newbury. However, just before the appointed day, the Justice of the Peace's son, who was at Oxford, he disappeared with a traveling actress, and his father had to go after him and was unable to be available that day. The vicar, who had boasted about what service was being done to the church and neighborhood by this prosecution, and who had determined to be at Newbury to help make it happen, he suddenly died. Another witness became seriously ill and could not attend, and later this person actually died. Another fell down breaking his leg, and he could not travel. There were 7 or 8 of these false witnesses, and in the end there was only one that was left. It was Edward's gardener, who had been frequently employed by Edward for a day labor, but had never lodged at the castle, nor had he had been admitted to the religious assemblies that were held there. The justice of the peace had thought that as a servant to the family, the gardener would be a natural evidence. He had been given liquor for several days as a bribe. With no one else to testify, the gardener, he felt overcome with shame to think of what he was doing, and he refused to appear. When Edward appeared at Newbury Assize, there was not a single person there to witness against him. Another nonconformist minister was Nicholas Thorogood, who was a scholar from Cambridge. He had been a merchant and traveler. After becoming a nonconformist minister, he went out of the state church with over 2,000 other nonconforming ministers and endured privation with them. One day, Nicholas, he reproved in his sermon the sin of swearing. One of his hearers was guilty of the sin, and he was offended, and he resolved to kill him. He hid himself behind a hedge that Nicholas would ride by, and he determined to shoot him. However, when he had his opportunity, his gun would not go off. He tried again the next week, and the gun again would not go off. Upon this, the man's conscience had accused him for such wickedness, and he called after Nicholas, and he fell down on his knees, and with tears he related the whole story to him, and he begged his forgiveness. This providence of God in protecting Nicholas was actually the means of the conversion of this man. From that day he became a serious and good man. Oliver Heywood was a nonconformist minister, and in 1664 he was apprehended as an excommunicated person, but he was not taken. He was prudent and cautious and kept himself private. God protected him from the search of his pursuers, but he was deprived of his income. One time the family was in such great straits with no money or provisions, and the children, they were hungry and impatient. Oliver asked their faithful and loyal servant, whose name was Martha, who refused to desert her master and mistress in their distress. He asked her to take a basket and ask the shopkeeper to lend him 5 shillings. Then, if he was kind enough to lend the money, to use it to buy some food. Martha came to the shopkeeper's home, but her heart failed her, and she passed by the door again and again without going in to tell of her errand. The shopkeeper saw the girl and said, "Are you not Mr. Heywood's servant?" Martha said that she was, and the shopkeeper said that he was so glad to see her because some friends had given him 5 guineas for her master, and he was wondering how he was going to get it to him. Martha burst into tears and told him of her errand. The shopkeeper was much affected with the story and told Martha to come to him if any like necessity should return. Eventually, Oliver Heywood was forced to leave his home because of persecution. He let his horse go its own way, not knowing where he should go. After traveling for hours in winter cold, the horse turned aside from the main road and went into the yard of a farmhouse. Oliver asked for food for his horse and shelter by the fire for himself, saying that he had no money to pay for their hospitality. He was kindly received, and learning where he had come from, they cautiously asked if he knew Oliver Heywood. The horse had led him to the home of Nonconformist believers. It was a rejoicing meeting of friends who later helped the minister on his way. Vavasor Powell was a Nonconformist minister in Wales. He became a Baptist, and as a dissenter, he suffered for his faith during this time when the state church was wielding the lash of persecution. Vavasor was very active in his service, and there were few, if any, churches, chapels, and town halls in Wales where he had not preached. The mountains were a favorite place for the preaching of Christ, and even the fairs and markets were used for this purpose. There is a little volume that is housed in the British Museum that was published anonymously in 1671, and is titled Life and Death of Vavasor Powell. In this volume is recorded some special deliverances that God did on behalf of Vavasor Powell. Now, in North Wales, there is a large island, and it's called Anglesey. And it's known for its beautiful beaches and ancient sites. There is a 13th century castle on the island and a village with the longest name in Britain. The name contains something like 50 letters. It was about the year 1647, and the Parliament forces were sent to this island, Anglesey, to reduce it. The Parliament's chief officers sent Vavasor Powell to preach to the soldiers. Vavasor says, "As I marched with them into the place, either the night immediately before or the night before that, it was revealed to me in my sleep that I should be wounded, and 2 of my fingers cut, and the very fingers were pointed out. This accordingly came to pass, when I was in extreme danger between several enemies who fell upon me, receiving that and some other wounds, there being no likelihood to escape. I heard a voice, as I apprehended, speaking audibly to me. I have chosen thee to preach the gospel. To which I answered, O Lord, then bring me off. And immediately God guided my horse, though he was very wild and not well commanded, to go backward out of the barricade that I had entered at, and so I was indeed miraculously preserved." End quote. Now, Vavasor would journey thousands of miles over mountains and through valleys, preaching by day and night. Vavasor said, "One time, coming from preaching, I lost my way, and being out till it was far in the night, in a wood or forest, among lakes, briars, and thorns, I went up and down until I was quite weary. But by looking up to the Lord, I was presently directed into my way." End quote. This experience of being lost at night, and then praying to God and him helping him find his way, happened more than once. He would be so lost and tired and searching to and fro to no purpose, but when he called upon the Lord, he was shown the way, and it seemed as clear to him as if it had been daylight. One time, Vavasor's horse fell lame, and he knew that he could not reach the place he was journeying to by foot. He got off his horse and he prayed, begging strength of God for both himself and for his horse to perform the journey. When he again mounted his horse, he found that the lameness had departed. There were several times when Vavasor said that he was delivered from perils by water, by thieves and enemies who purposely were laying in wait for him. Some of these enemies were even converted, and the Lord graciously prevented and terrified others from their wicked purposes. In the end, Vavasor Powell was imprisoned in a prison in London, and early in 1669, he died in prison. He was buried in Dunhill Fields, London, the old Nonconformist burial ground. He was a witness for truth, and on his tombstone is carved a successful teacher of the past, a sincere witness of the present, and a useful example to the future age, who, in face of the defection of many, found mercy to be faithful, for which, being called to many a prison, he was there tried and would not accept deliverance, expecting a better resurrection." End quote. These stories were written down and kept as a memorial of the Lord's benefits to stir up others to faith and action. These miracle stories prove that we can have confidence in the power and the goodness of God, who is the Savior of all men, but especially to them who believe. I hope that this has been a blessing to you and that you are interested in this history. There's much we can learn as we study these beautiful stories from history, and there's much faith that we can build as we listen to these stories. And when we exercise that faith, we will see that there are these kind of stories in our own life. I want to thank each one of you for listening, and I'm wishing you God's blessings.